In this session, we'll be looking at some of the introduction tools to 12D Model to be used for civil engineering design projects. I'll give you a bit of a background on the 12D templates and their application. I know some firms have started to use the snippets, but the templates and their background on how they're produced and their inputs are very similar for the snippets as well. So it's a good background and a grounding in how the 12D design process works. The MTF design, some of the commands, the most common commands I'll touch on briefly, and you'll see how that develops the design as we go through as well. And I'll utilize some of the smart options that 12D has in terms of picking changes and referencing off other elements. So when those objects update, you'll see how the design will update and flow through to your project. Hi, my name's Rod Burns. I work for EXDS and I'm one of the 12D Model trainers and technical support staff. So what's required in our civil engineering design? Well, I tend to believe there's sort of three building blocks that all projects need. The first one is a tin or a triangulation to start off with, giving us a ground surface, or some people refer to this as the DTM. We also need to develop some super alignments. This is to produce the horizontal and vertical geometry which we'll utilize. In our case, we'll be doing an example of a road, but it could be a railway line or an open channel or anything really, basically just to have some horizontal and vertical geometry on there. And from that, we will then hang some templates, or as I've said earlier, some snippets could be utilized to produce all the other design strings and link the design together to form the full 3D shape. Now this presentation, I'm not going to go into too much detail about creating a triangulation or a tin. Hopefully you're pretty comfortable with creating them and editing them as needed. We're going to jump more into the other design elements. So the super alignments, often referred to as SA on the toolbars and in other menus across 12D, provide the horizontal and vertical geometry, as I said. And these can be designed by various methods. There's the intersection point method, the parametric design or the element method. I often refer to this one as a bit like the Lego box because there's a lot of different elements we can sort of snap together to build up our geometry. Or we can actually use a mixture of the two, the intersection point and the parametric design or element method. So it's quite flexible how you want to use the super alignment, and there actually will be other talks on the super alignments, both in the intersection point and the parametric or the element method. So check those out. Once we add the speed tables and the computators, the super alignment is quite a powerful tool on its own. So again, not going to cover too much of that, but it is another fundamental building block of our design. The third part, which I'll go into a bit more depth in here, is the templates themselves. So the 12D model templates have been around since 12D started. Essentially, they're just a collection of links that you'll see in a moment, and we can run those down the left or the right hand side of our reference string or alignment. They can be used on their own, or we can also use multiple templates and interpolate between the templates, but quite typically one template is used on the left or the right, and this has often been replaced now with snippets also in later versions of 12D model. So a bit of the background on the templates, they all live in the same area under design templates. There's options to create and edit these templates. You can rename them or copying them if you want to. And probably another good tool to know is the fact that you can actually export out some templates and import those into future projects. So once you can start to build up a bit of a library, essentially it's just a text file that's created and it can hold a lot of templates for you, and you can then read that in from project to project. And obviously we've also got the option there to delete the templates if you don't want them in the project anymore. So let's get into the templates themselves. So when you actually create a template, you provide some geometry essentially. And these strings are all linked together from the reference string or the center line typically. The links have an individual name and they produce each of the strings longitudinally. And we often use the fixed part of the template, and it's referred to as the fixed part because as the road might be going up or down, left or right, the actual shape of those fixed elements will be locked in place. They're fixed by you, the user, and given those parameters that you've fixed into the cells there. Only two values are required, and what I mean there is basically between the width, the height, and the crossfall, only two of the values are required to form the position of each of those links or the strings. And it's also important to note the links further down your template are reliant on previous links. So what I'm trying to get at there is that if the KLL or the curb lip line was to adjust, say you adjust the crossfall of the road, then all the links after that string would also update automatically. So there is a hierarchy, I guess, working from the center line out is the best way that 12D would like you to code it. And that way each of those links can be individually adjusted without affecting links further on. Just to have a look at this again, why only 2 links or values are needed. If you have a look here, we've got a new point here based off a previous point. And essentially the program is only require either a width, a height, or a crossfall to position that link in its place. So it's really important to have this understanding between the width, the height, and the crossfall. Obviously, if we were to change the width, we would then get a choice of whether we want to maintain the crossfall or maintain the height. And obviously that would then produce a different answer for the link. Also, we were able to insert links absolutely. So they don't always actually have to go on the design surface. We can actually insert links absolutely above or below that surface. And these tools are often used to create the subgrade surface and services design, utility services design underneath the design surface also. So we're not just set at one surface itself, we can actually do multiple layers within the design process if we want. So we'll touch on some of that also. So when we're creating our templates, there's basically, it falls through this option. It goes from through the fixed part of the template through to the decisions, cut, fill, and then to the final cut fill, which is essentially the last part of the interfacing up or down to the triangulation. So all those parameters can be set within those, and that will produce a number of strings for us. Various templates can be used, and the decisions can be quite a powerful tool to model different rock stratas and such. But we'll be looking at it in a simpler fashion in this case. The problem is obviously when the project, over the length of the project, might have a number of changes occur, and it sometimes is handy actually not to create lots of templates. This is when the MTF file or the modifiers templates file was created, so that we can adjust these links and adjust the parameters to change the crossfall, the width of the road if we wanted to. So it's really important to have an understanding of how it all goes together with the MTF file, and we will be diving into the MTF file itself. Okay, so now you're hopefully pretty happy with the 3 parts of the jigsaw puzzle, but it's time to put them all together. There are some other tools under the design apply area of 12D that you might also want to be aware of. There's a straight interfacing, which is where you can do a cut, fill, batter slope if you wish to, essentially just nominating the slopes that you require, and 12D will then go and interface to the triangulation at those set slopes. Another one is a simple applying of a template. And you can see here, it will allow you to run one template on the left and one template on the right. But the geometry and the strings or links that are created within the template are then set. So they can't be modified any further. This is a fine technique to use if the geometry or your design is quite simple and you don't need to do any modification. But I'd say probably 90% of the time, users would actually move to the apply menu or the apply MTF file, which is essentially going to apply our modifiers templates file, and that file lives essentially there. It's just a little text file that actually has a number of commands in it that we'll be building up, and that will generate where our design goes together. Okay, so that's probably enough of the background. Let's jump across into 12D now, and we will actually start to work on the project itself, and I'll start to show you how the MTF file works. So here we are in a very simple 12D project. There's not much going in. You can see we've got a ground triangulation set. So I've got that one already set up, and I've already got some super alignments set up. The road I'm going to work on is RS01, which runs from the northeast up here down to the south, down in this direction here. And you can see the horizontal geometry and also its vertical geometry over on the right-hand side here. So it's already been set up with the horizontal and vertical. And if I go under design templates, create edit, you can see there are a number of templates that have already been loaded into this project and ready automatically. 12D does have some standard shipped templates, which you are able to input. If you were to click on the library and come down to the 12D library, there are some standard road templates as an example, but they might need some actual additional edits made to them. So you can definitely read the file in, that will create the templates for you, and then you can come in and actually edit those further. Have a quick look at the templates, the road left-hand side, you can see all the fixed elements in here. And the left-hand side have this extra extension I guess with the character L at the end being the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is similar with the third character being an R. That's just so if we were to develop any subgrade strings, I guess, or pavement or boxing layers, that we have to nominate which is the left and right hand side and keep them named individually. So it's often a little bit easier to do that within the template itself. So that's our template. I'll just finish that there and we'll go in and start to put this together. So under design, apply MTF. It's quite a large panel, but when it first comes up, you can see the very first thing it actually asks for is a reference string or our center line. So in this case, I just come over to the arrow to select my string, accept the super alignment and lock in the RS01, row number 1. Now the programmers have actually taken the name of the string and have suggested that's what we might want to call the function name. And indeed, the MTF file, the little notepad file that we're going to create in a couple of minutes, which will actually house all our templates and our rules that we want to apply along this alignment or along this road. Now all the other tabs at the moment are all completely blank. And there's a little trick that if we come in here, if we're actually happy with that function name, I can get my cursor flashing behind that and hit enter. Now by doing that, as 12D, the programmers have taken that name and you can see they're now going to produce a volume report with that name also represented in the volume report name. And additionally, models will be created with the name also. So we're getting design strings. These are where all the links will go into an RS01 model. And my cross sections again will be automatically generated for road or RS01 also. I'll get polygons and road boundaries generated. And I do tend to strip these extra characters off here at this point, just so that all the visualization strings, if those polygons, if I want them to keep them, they will actually all be captioned into one layer or one model, and also with the road boundaries. So it just, again, just to bring the list of models down a little bit to make it a little bit easier. Under miscellaneous, I'm going to come back to this in a minute. And there's also a road tin that's being generated that's automatically ticked on for RS01 also. So far it looks fairly good, and we're just gone through the other tabs. At this point, I'm not interested in really creating plots or doing tadpoles. I might come back and add those into the function a little bit later. But if I come back to the main tab, I've definitely locked in the alignment string, and you can see it's highlighted in the plan view now. And I need to come back and actually add in the triangulation. So I'm going to add in the survey tin, and this will tell 12D that's the triangulation to do the final cut fill batter to. And I also need to put in the third part of the jigsaw puzzle, which was the templates, and they live in this MTF file. So clicking on the yellow folder, you can see in the project at the moment, there's no MTF file with this name, hasn't been created before, it's a new one. So I'm actually going to come down to the word open. Now it might seem a little bit strange. I think the programmers might think you're a little bit strange trying to open a file that doesn't exist. But it then does ask you, do you want to create this file? And that's exactly what I want to do. The nice way about doing this is the fact that it's already named and it already relates to the center line or the reference string. It knows about that string also. So if I simply hit create, this little MTF editor is sort of the front window to the notepad file. And it's a nice way to edit the functions and the rules that we're going to build up for this road and this alignment. So the hinge at the top is often used by rail designers, and there's a couple of tools in there definitely for rail designers to have a look at. But mostly for road design and other designs, again, most of the tools would be under the modify left or modify right, which is the left-hand side and the right-hand side, respective sides. Clicking on the left-hand side, you can see we get a bunch of big MTF rules, and at the moment there's no rules defined. But if I double click in the cell here and go fixed, insert, and just simply insert full template, I can then nominate the template that I wish to load. And in my case, it's the road left-hand side. Hitting set will lock in that value so that it knows, 12D will know when it actually calculates the function to run this template down the left-hand side. And I need to do the same similarly to the right. Now you can see you can open the left and right at the same time. I can even highlight the cells from the left and copy them, Control C, and paste them across onto the right. But again, if you wanted to open up, it's just simply a double left mouse button click, fixed, insert, and insert the full template. And again, I'd need to select the template name. In this case, it's the right-hand side. Hitting OK and OK just saves that line of modifier, and hitting OK here also will just close that down so it's ready to run. But I will, at the first instance, need to come over and hit save. This will just, again, save the notepad file, which this function is going to utilize. So if I'm ready to go now, I've got my center line, I've got my tin, and I've now got my templates loaded into this MTF file. So as soon as I hit apply, I should get some values down the bottom. This is the natural surface, or the survey tin, to the design surface. So it's giving me the amount of cut, the amount of fill, and the balance between the two. So numbers, any numbers, even if the numbers look a little bit bad, the numbers are actually a good key indicator that something has worked, and we should be able to come across to the plus button and add on the new models, which are the strings and the cross sections, and add those on here. So they're being applied. Every time I hit the word apply, 12D will essentially delete the design and come back and recalculate the design for me. So that's how that is working so far. Now at the moment, what we've created is this tin, as I said, and if I had a look at the tin, add it onto the view here, it's all being colored up quite nicely out of the colors in the template. I probably shouldn't have closed the template down. Coming back and editing that one, let's open up the left-hand side. So you can see all the colors that are here, the asphalts, the concrete, the grass, they're producing us a nice result in terms of the coloring of the triangulation. And if you wanted to get a little bit fancy, we could even come in and render it, and essentially applying little bitmap files based on those colors. 12D has a textures file, simply set that, and we get quite a clean result straight away, where grass starts to look like grass and the bitumen is starting to look like the bitumen, just based off the colors. So that's happening automatically in the background the whole time. We're getting this pretty picture and visualization built up as we do our design. But in plan, what it has meant is that all the strings or the links that have been generated are all the darker colors, grass and concrete and things. So I skipped over it earlier, but under the miscellaneous tab, we can actually load in a map file. So coming across to the yellow folder, again, your office might have one in your library. 12D comes with a 12D library example one as well for the public works or some councils. This is the one I'm going to use for my project. And if I quickly open it up and have a look at it, you'll see how it works. Essentially, it comes in here and looking at the string name, I'm just coming down the list here so I can get for the curb lip line. So curb lip line, it will turn those strings to being yellow. And if I wanted to, I could also apply some sort of a line style to them if I've got some sort of a line style that I wanted to apply there. Now the little question mark obviously is to replace the letter L and R. So that way this KL, if it's left, right, or anything else, as long as the string is named correctly with KL, it will get colored up yellow for me. So just placing the map file in there and hitting apply again, you'll see now I'll get the pretty picture in the 3D or the perspective view, but I'll also get all the coloring that I'd want for my plan presentation. And that's how we can combine the two to get both the pretty 3D picture and the mapping for your CAD or your plan presentation there. This tool is basically set now. I don't really need to change anything else in here. Every time I apply, as I've shown you, it just goes and recalculates the road design again. But the programmers have made it a little bit easier where over on the actual MTF file itself, they've actually placed the word recalculate. Again, it does the same, and you'll see it pop up in a second. It'll come out and it'll actually report to me what the new volume answer is. And so that means that I can now essentially finish this panel. I don't need to see that anymore because I can actually recalculate the function directly off the MTF file, and everything is now housed within this MTF file. Okay, so far we've got it to work fairly well. We've run the templates down. And we've just run the templates, if you can see here, from the start of the reference string through to the end of the reference string. And you can see the end here is actually ending right to the center of the other road. Typically, I'd want to finish the templates at where the curb returns are, or the tangent points of the curb returns. So not really where the end of the reference string is. I probably want to change that a little bit. Before I get into that, we've also got a couple of number of buttons over to the right here, which I'll just also explain. So I said to you before, this is a little bit like Excel. You could click on the line number and go insert above or below. That's completely fine to do that. Or if you prefer, we can use the little blue arrows here with the lines on them to also insert above a number of rows if you want to, or also insert below. Just makes it nice and easy. The big red X, as you'd expect, is to delete rows of code if you wish to. And the top blue buttons are actually to change the order. So if you get your coding out of the incorrect location, you can actually move the code up and down as needed. So there are a couple of the buttons on the side while we dive into it. And I just want to also explain to you some of the other commands. So we dive straight into the fixed part to insert this template in and give us the strings essentially. We could have individually inserted the strings also, or as I did touch on, some people are starting to use snippets. But the modifiers themselves, the MTF file, is directly linked back to the template. And you can see that in the template here, where we've got the word fixed, and then under template, we've got the other words with the decision, the cut, the fill, and the final. So the MTF file, the modifiers templates file, is literally going to modify any of the values that we want, as I've shown you, in the width, the height, or the crossfall. And then we just have to take note of what length it is that we wish to change, the name of the string, essentially, and where that string is generated across the actual design. So if you wish to change something like the final fill slope or the final cut slope, well, out of the template, we've definitely given it some answers, 1 in 2 and 1 in 3, but it might be that you want to come under the templates, under the final cut and fill part here, the final cut and fill, and change one of the slopes here, either the cut slope or the fill slope. And that would essentially just override the original values and set a new parameter for the design to work off. So essentially the MTF file is just touching back and changing the parameters in this file here. So the interval, now the interval option here is essentially talking about the chainage interval. And I probably didn't need to shut down the function so quickly, just popping that one up. When we ran these cross sections, we actually generated them at every 5 meters. And you can see that the section separation was generated every 5 meters. If you wanted to override that or change the interval, we could come up here and essentially just change the interval to a closer interval if we wanted to get a little bit more detail in a certain section of our design. So the interval there is set and we can override that. The create options were for creating shapes or tri-mesh objects. So this is quite useful now in creating different pavement types and thicknesses, and is often used now for our digital engineering when we're needing to produce some BIM objects. So we can create different shapes, strings, tins, polygons, and even put attributes on it this process also as we're creating these shapes and strings. The more options there really to help you debug any errors that you might have in your MTF file. I hope we don't get too many of those. Normally the programmer will tell you where the error is, and that will often be displayed in the output window. And you can see there we can actually clear the output window so that any errors are just populated within the output window down the bottom here as it processes through. So I'm hoping you don't get too many of those, but usually the programmer will say, look, the error's on the left-hand side and it's at line 35. Go and check those ones out. And the programmer's gotten fairly good at actually debugging your work for you. So hopefully you don't have too many of those problems. As I said, the snippets, they sort of do encompass, or they can encompass basically fixed parts, changing the intervals, or even creating the shapes. So the snippets live at the top level of our MTF tools because they can encompass any of the rules from any of the other areas. Now the comments, if you've done any 12D or any programming before, that you'll find that being able to leave a comment for yourself is quite handy. So I'm just going to insert a quick comment. So that when I come back in a couple of weeks' time, I can differentiate where the comments are compared to the rest of the code. And the comments stand out fairly nice and bright for us as a bright yellow bar. So that's the comments. And the regions are a little bit like a comment, but you'll see, I'll just put in here design surface. They actually come up as a, let's put that in a little, there you go, as a light blue bar, and I'll put another one down here, another region in here, maybe for the subgrade. Or some people refer to it as boxing surface. And you'll see that they're a light blue bar. And they've got the additional trick in with them there. We've got the negative button here, or a minus button, which we can actually collapse. So clicking on the little minus button actually will collapse the code underneath until it gets to the next region. That's quite handy if your project's quite large and you have lots of lines of coding. You can obviously segment the code around, segment the code to your needs, and then just hide it where you wish to hide it there. Okay, so we've got a couple of commands there, a couple more. The other 4 blue buttons that we have over on the side here are obviously going from one region to another region, and again, just making it easier to get through your MTF file and get to the correct modifiers. We can bring up the regions themselves, the text that you've typed in. So again, we can jump from one to the other if we want to get around the project quite quickly. And also under the ABC here, we can also list out the number of comments. So as you write comments in, this list will grow. And obviously it just gives you the line number of where the comment is as well. So you can jump directly to that line of code to make it, again, a little bit easier to use and manipulate your MTF file. So there you go. Coming back, right. So I wanted to chop this off essentially where the tangent point is on the left-hand side. So the start chainage is correct, but my end chainage here is definitely not going to be the end of the reference string. So I'm going to come in here, definitely going to run this template from the start, but the end chainage is not going to be the reference. It's actually, well, we've got lots of choices, and I'm going to explain a fair few of these, but the one that's probably in here that I'm going to just show now is the typed. This is essentially where you can type a chainage in. So again, on the keyboard, I can just type in 270. So I hit apply, and you can see the little yellow arrows now jumped from the end of the alignment to chainage 270 that I've typed in there. But obviously that is not the actual tangent point. So instead of typing the number and just guessing, I could come across and use the little CH button there, which is to measure the chainage. This allows me to, on screen in the plan view here, go and measure exactly where the tangent point is. It highlights the tangent point, it highlights the curve with the diamond. So now I've got the very last point on the curve. And as soon as I accept that, either right mouse button or middle mouse button accept, the new chainage answer is locked into the cell. So as soon as I hit apply, the little arrow moves to the new location of the new chainage. And if I wanted to apply and actually have the row update, I could come back across to recalculate and recalculate the design again, and you can see how it's now chopped off on the left-hand side at that specific chainage. Now, chainages are good, but the problem will be that if our alignment gets longer or shorter, then that chainage number will no longer be the correct value. So there is some limitations of actually using the typed command, which is why, well, you can see that the program has gone to quite a lot of effort to produce another different possible result for you. So rather than actually picking it off the tangent point or locking in a chainage, I'm going to actually lock in the start of the other string, and the other string being the curb return itself. Now, essentially, it's the same chainage. It will be getting the curb return number 9, the start of that string, and dropping it across to the center line and defining that 270 chainage that we measured before. But it does mean that there's no chainage actually saved in the MTF file. So if our alignment was to get larger or smaller, or the horizontal was to change, then there's no chainage actually being specified, and we're locating it on this other object, the other element being that curb return string. So a lot of effort has gone into giving us these smart chainages they're referred to, so that we don't actually have to physically lock in a chainage. So if you're having to use typed, I suggest we can possibly do things a different way. And there's a lot of different options in there to go and have a look at and test different methods to come up with a process that will then allow you to update your design, and all these changes will flow through for you automatically. So I'm going to try and do that as much as possible in the demonstration to show you how these can be used. Okay, so that's giving you an introduction, I guess, onto placing the templates in and giving us a bit of design. I'm going to come back up to the start of our alignment, again on the left-hand side here, and I wanted to place it in a bit of a parking bay here. Introduce a couple of new elements and go through some of the more useful MTF or modifier tools, the ones that are used quite often. So to give you a bit of a picture on what we're trying to develop, let's just quickly jump back to the PowerPoint presentation, and you'll see the finished result before we get there. So this is what I'm hoping for. Now that we've run those 3 elements or the parts of the jigsaw puzzle together, I'm going to try and build the little parking bay like this. I'm going to introduce a new string, not actually into the template itself, but just directly into the MTF file. And then I'm going to do some tapering of the ends here to finish off the design as well. So a couple of different commands to see how they work, and just to give you a bit more background on some of the standard tools that 12D utilizes. So back into 12D, that's what I'm hoping to do here. And again, before I start any of this sort of work, I would obviously start with some sort of a comment. Again, just so that when I come back in the future, my coding is at. So I've inserted a comment in there. I'll insert a couple of new lines, and we're going to place it in our parking area. So to start off, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to pick some chainages. I said I wasn't going to use chainages, but first of all, we've inserted the full template, but just to show you that you can do this, that we don't actually have to put it in the template itself. I could come across to fixed, insert, and just simply insert a string in. This would be similar to actually going to the template and essentially deciding where in the template I'd want a new string, so about here somewhere, and then going and filling in the values. And you can see that the questions that 12D ask over here are very similar in terms of what did you want to call the link, the new link that we're going to produce. Now, if you don't know what the link names are, we can utilize the little N button there, and that populates the standard 12D naming or the naming convention your office might be using. Under here, there's some design. I've got a line marking one here, and I might go for the continuity line. So that's just placed in there the right string name, so I don't actually have to guess. It's definitely on the left-hand side, and I might change the color back to being our road asphalt. So if I click on the little color cell here, there's lots of colors to choose from, but because I'm trying to do all the visualization and make a pretty picture at the end of the day also, I'm going to keep it with the road asphalt color there. I need to place in the width and the crossfall, so I'm going to use the values that are similar to here, a width of 3.5 and the crossfall of -3%. So it's just a crowned road. Where do I want this to be placed? So at the moment, if I didn't actually place any values in this chainage area, 12D would actually calculate it from the very start of the road all the way to the end of the road. But I don't want the parking bay to go over that length. I actually want the parking bay possibly just to run from chainage 40 to around about 100. And I just said to you I wasn't going to use typed, but just to get this going, I'll just type these numbers in quickly. And then I want to apply this new answer. Now you'll notice when I hit apply here, it saves the answer and it's put the yellow arrows on my plan view there, but nothing's actually been updated. I actually need to come all the way across to here to hit the word recalculate. Or a quick little tip, if you actually click on auto recalculate, any of the apply buttons at any level here, as soon as you hit them, it actually will go through and calculate and apply it for you. And you can see there, it's applied that quite nicely for me and introduced my new link. But it's not quite what I had in mind. Now you can see the line marking where it's being produced, but it's in the wrong section. Because I didn't tell 12D where I wanted the new string to be introduced, and because the template already exists, 12D's essentially inserted the string at the very bottom and put the LC string in here, which is definitely not where I want it. So what I need to tell 12D is I actually want to move this one up, and I want to put the value in here. So I need to tell 12D whether it's before the curved lip line or it's after the center line of the crown there on the left-hand side. So if I just put in here before KLL, and it will be caps lock or case sensitive, exactly how you've got it in the template is what you want to be naming it, then 12D will know, okay, in terms of the relationship, it will insert this string into the template and it will position it in that location within your template. So just the order of things are pretty important, as I said before, because everything will then relate to that positioning. So just with that simple change, putting the before or where it is living across the road itself and hitting apply, you'll see here that the line marking's gone in and everything else has been pushed out, of course, by that same 3.5 or 3 meter answer with the 3% crossfall. So that's just giving you a little relationship, I guess, of the template, but you can also do the same sort of tools and insert strings directly into the actual modifiers if you want to. So that's placed that in there, but I possibly don't want to be locking it into certain chainages. So you can actually utilize some other techniques, and I'm just going to quickly design a construction string. So I'm just going to be drawing this construction string. I've just called it construction string number 1, a CAD string, cyan, and I'll just be placing that roughly from chainage 40, but not exactly at that chainage, down to approximately where 100 is. And you can see the string there. I wanted to do that so that I don't actually have to type the chainages in. So again, we could locate this from survey information or just other design elements that you might have, but we can actually design construction elements that we can then utilize as part of our design. And you'll see now, I can come back and actually say that I do want to use the other string, again, the start of this string, and it locks that in, and also the end of the other string. And again, by doing this, the start of the string will be dropped perpendicular onto the center line, and that will become the new chainage. Similarly, the end will also be dropped, and if I apply, you'll see it won't be much of a change, but it'll actually lengthen up and change to the new length of that string. And that's how we can actually locate and position things. So again, they're independent, but they're referenced together, and they're actually working in tandem there. So it's quite a nice tool to be able to use, and that's using the start and end of other strings. Now, if this has happened to be drawn in CAD and imported into 12D, it's possible that the vertices or the direction of the string might be different. So let me just turn on these. You can see at the moment there's the direction of the string, 1 and 2, so that was the direction. But if I was to reverse the string, so coming over to here and hitting reverse, just to basically reverse the direction of our string, now that's the start and the end here. Now this might cause a bit of concern, and when 12D goes to calculate it, this is the error that's reported. Yes, the start and end changes are out of order, which you can see. I've gone from 99 back to 37. And it's also told me that the error's on the left-hand side modifier, and it's at line 5. So this is the error I was talking about earlier, where the program has gotten fairly good at picking out where your errors are and telling you exactly, hey, you better go and have a better look at this. So not always the start and end are the best options, and so the program has also given us the lowest drop chainage and also the highest drop chainage. What this basically means is that 12D will get the string, the highest and the lowest points of the string, or the ends of the strings, and essentially drop both of them onto the center line. Now, because our alignment's going in this direction, this end will always be the lower chainage, and this end of our construction string will always be the higher chainage. So therefore, there's no need to worry about so much about the direction of the string anymore. Both ends are dropped across, and 12D will take either the highest answer in terms of the chainage or the lowest. But again, we're not typing a value in. That's the one thing I really want to specify or highlight, is that we don't want to be typing in chainages. And you can see it's run through again. I get my values and everything's happy. If I wanted to utilize those chainages again, this construction string, I might actually use an alias. An alias is one of our interval commands, and it basically is a code for where this parking bay might be. So I'm just going to type in the word parking bay, and you might have multiple, so you need to name each one of them individually. I'm going to call this parking bay number 1. Again, applying it doesn't create anything different, but when I come into actually modifying further, I won't actually have to pick the construction string again. I'll actually be able to reference off our alias name and utilize the chainages that 12D have already locked in. And you can see the alias names are filled out in this column here if they're being utilized. So now we've put that in, I wanted to do some modifications. The lane width is still 3.5. So I wanted to come in and use one of the tools that's mostly used under the fixed, and it's the modifying the link. As I said, this one is probably used 80% of the time out of all the 12D commands, because this one allows us to modify the width, the height, and the crossfall. And again, it all comes back to the templates. I don't know why I keep shutting this one down, but you can see here where we've got the width, the height, and the crossfall. So 12D, the panel will always open up the same way, and it'll basically ask you, okay, on our design, what link is it that we wish to modify, which was the string that we want to change. So you will have to know the string names, But if you can't remember, because they are case sensitive and it does matter when you're typing it in, if you don't like typing like me, you can actually hover over the cell and click on the wheel or the middle mouse button. That'll allow you to select the string from the screen, and you can see it's loaded up the information there. So I've got exactly the KLL, the curved lip line string. I can hit accept and it's locked the string name in. That's the link I want to modify. Now, how do I want to modify it? I drop the menu down here. You can see I can modify the width, the height, the crossfall, or the slope, or possibly 2 of the 3 answers. So you might want to not just modify one answer, you might want to actually modify two of the answers that you've got specified. So just have a look. In my case, I definitely want to modify the width, but I also want to maintain the crossfall so that it maintains the 3% crossfall. Otherwise, as the height, if I was to lock in the height, the crossfall would actually have to steepen up to maintain that same height across that distance. So I definitely want the width, modifying the width, but I'm definitely holding my crossfall that I've got in the original crossfall answer here for that link also. Never selected a height there. So as this road gets wider and narrower, it will maintain the 3% as it gets pushed out. And what is my new width answer? My new width I want it to be is 3.0. That's all you need for parking. You don't need anything more than that. So I've told it the string, I've told it how I wish to modify this, and I've given it the new value, the new parameter to pass in to override the old parameter that was loaded into the template itself. And now the program is asking me, okay, where is this going to happen along the chainage of my road? Now again, as I said, I could pick the lowest and the highest, or the start and the end, but now that I've loaded in this alias called parking bay, I'll have access to this relative to alias start and also pick up the alias end. So the alias start, and if I drop down the arrow here, you can see it's exactly what I've typed in, parking bay number 1. And for the end one, I'm also going to pick the alias here, parking bay number 1. So essentially this line of code, these chainages here, will be getting the answers from parking bay, the start chainage and the end chainage, which happen to be built off the construction strings again. So you can see how I'm reutilizing the chainages and using the aliases to do that. So I don't have to keep picking the strings each time. I'll do that, hit apply. And again, you're not going to see much difference on the screen because it's just pulled it in a little bit. So it's a little bit narrower there. Now comes the transitions. Get a couple of more lines. I'm just inserting a couple more lines there. And this time, again, I'm going to modify the link, the same link name, but I don't want to modify just one width. Before I just typed in the one width of 3 meters. Now I actually need 2 widths. Now starting off here, you can see I've got a width and a width, and it's basically referring to what width did I want at the start. And essentially I want to bring this yellow string in, or the lip of the curve across, so that there's no width at that point. But as I come down to form this triangle shape up, I actually do want to have a width of 3.0 meters. Where's this going to take place? Well, I've already utilized the aliases before, so let me do that again. So the start chainage, where the start width is going to be applied, would be the alias of the start with the width of 0. And the alias of the end, or the end chainage here, will be the alias of the start again. So I'm actually going to utilize the same point. But I've got this option to use an extension along the reference string. So I've actually picked the start point here for the start, and the end width, I want it to be 15 meters down the road. So I can actually place in here 15 meters from the start chainage, and that will be added on to automatically. So if I hit apply there, you'll see here, I've got this nice triangle shape formed, and it's based all off the aliases, and there's no chainages involved. So if my alignment was to adjust or move, then this will all update automatically. So it's quite a nice one where we can actually just place in there the 2 widths. There are other options in here as well, and again, I'm not going to go through all the different options at this point, but some people do like to use the reverse curves, and you'll see it will produce back-to-back or compound curves in here. And they're looking at a little bit segmented, and that's because of the chainage interval of every 5 meters. But on each of these commands, we can actually override the interval and place a closer interval to give us more definitions. So if I do that, put a 1 meter, you'll see there's a lot more cross sections defined. And now I've got in the reverse curves placed in there to form our geometry. So that's a very easy way to manipulate the transition there. Perhaps you like that one, or we could just simply go back to the width to width and again have a straight transition between the two widths there. The end transition is very similar. It's just in this case, we need to go from a width of 3 meters down to a width of 0. And because I've already got everything locked in here, I know the name of the string, the design curb lip line, I know where I'm going to do this, and that the widths will change. I could actually copy the command, do a right mouse button copy or Control C on the keyboard, and obviously paste it in for the third line. Editing the commands, I need to change the values around. So it will actually be starting at a width of 3 and tapering into a width of 0 at the end here. And the location where this will be taking place is actually not at the start. It's obviously happening at the end of my construction string or the end of the bus bay. So I'm going to change it to the alias end for the bus bay. And I want the transition to start again at the alias end, but this time I'm going to go back 15 meters. So the start point will take place 15 meters before the end, coming back in chainage along the reference string. And then the end chainage will end at the chainage itself, at the reference string or where the parking bay is being developed here. So I hit apply. You can see there's the taper being produced at the end there, again with our 1 meter interval. So this has all been set up chainage free. There's no chainages being involved. And it does allow me then to come in and essentially move the geometry. And come in and move one of the vertices, move the start of the parking bay up that way a little bit, hit apply, and because there's no chainages involved, the bus bay length or the length of the bus bay based off the geometry there will just update automatically, and the transitions will also shift automatically. You can see the code a little bit. It's pretty easy to read once you get used to it, inserting the string, modifying the full width for the 3 meters, and then doing our width to width transitions there from 0 to 3, and then from 3 back to 0 to taper that in there. So this is just giving you a bit of an understanding of how the modifiers work. The modifier link is used quite a lot to develop the links, to move the links in or out, up and down as needed, horizontally and vertically, to make them all independent as required. Just coming down the alignment a little bit further, one of the other commands that are used quite a bit, and if you did want true geometry, that you actually might produce a different CAD string with the true geometry that you want to set out or give to the surveyor, then there is a command in here. Again, I'm going to put a comment in here because this is going to be my bus bay. Oops. And at this section, I'm not going to come in and actually modify the link because I would actually have to, again, I'd have to give it all the geometry. There'd be quite a number of steps. There is an option under modify to, where I can actually go modify to a string. And this allows me to actually lock in a different string. Similar to the other modify link, it asks you first of all, what is the string or the links that you want to modify? So in my case, it's this curb lip line here, KLL, curb lip line on the left. And I want to modify the width and hold the crossfall. Again, the same options that were previous on the modify link options are also available. Then I just have to tell 12D what is the string that I'm going to go and widen to. So in this case, I can go and lock in my little construction bay there, my bus bay. Given it a string name, and sorry, the model name there, and also the string name you can see there. It's on the left side, closest, yes. And where is this going to take place? So we could pick the start of the other, if you knew the direction of the string. You can go start and other, and end of other string here. And this would then essentially just go and get 12D to trace the geometry for us. Again, you might want to close up the interval a little bit, but it will then go through and give us a perfect match and widening out to match that construction string with its geometry. Now, I've only told it to change the width, but if that parking bay, bus bay there actually had some vertical geometry, we could also, again, change the width and its height or match the vertical of the string that's been geometrically designed out there. So the center line and the bus bay could be independently designed but linked together with the string there. So that's also modifying to a string is also one of the commands that is used quite a bit. Helps us match in with existing boundary lines and such to get a nice clean fit and a finish for our designing places. So that's a couple of the commands that is utilized quite a bit on the left hand side and the right. Just thought we might go over to the right hand side and actually show you how we can also remove links. So we haven't done anything on the right hand side, so I'll just pop that one open. And you can see how I like to work with the commands or my plan view on one side and the commands on the other. It's quite helpful if you have dual monitors. You can set this up like this. But there is a little bit of a trick here. If you hit OK, you'll notice next time when I open it, it will still be small and in the wrong location. So the programmers have put a little bit of a trick that if you hit the word actually finish, and it's pretty rare that you actually do this, the programmers will actually save the location of where that panel was saved, or sorry, it was opened and the size of it. So if you set up your workspace quite nicely, and you might have this on your second monitor, you just have to hit the finish once, and a little MTF file is noted or created that will tell 12D where the locations of the panels are. And that little file can actually be taken from project to project also as part of the customization of 12D, but it does set up your workspace quite nicely for how you like to work. So on the right hand side, we haven't done much on the right hand side as yet. We've just inserted the template all the way down. Might come down here and actually do some super elevation, just a quick super elevation on the right hand side, and we'll also remove some of the strings through the intersection. So I'm going to again need a couple of lines of command, and I'm going to cheat. Let's grab that command there, control copy on the keyboard, and come over to this side and go paste, and essentially just paste that command straight in. So again, it gets a little bit easier the more you use the MTF file where you can cheat from left to right. And I'll just do a very simple super elevation. And to see this happen, let's just turn on the design tin. There we go. And we'll also toggle on the tin contours and change the interval up. So that's under the tin settings here, where we might make that every 0.1 and 0.5. Or we might also change the colors to sort of a dark gray and a lighter gray there for every fifth contour line. You can see the V shape there of the center line. So we'll be producing that into a one-way crossfall, maybe back from the tangent point here. So let's insert comment, super elevation. And again, some more of these modifying the link. So obviously, again, it's the curved lip on the right, but it is case sensitive. So you just have to be aware of that if you're typing it in. I'm a terrible typer, so I tend to go middle mouse button, come into the screen, click it off the screen, just read what the list of the information is there. I've definitely locked it on the KLR, the curved lip on the right side, so I can lock that string in, and now I want to change the super elevation or the crossfall and hold the width. Now by changing the crossfall, you'll notice that the next type of commands change to crossfall, and all the subsequent options are relating to crossfall. If I had picked height, then all the other options underneath that would then relate to height. So again, it's relating back to the width, the height, and the crossfall options that we had in the original template. The snippets will utilize these same commands also, so we can still modify the width, the height, and the crossfall of the strings, whether they're developed through the snippet or through the template. But I definitely want, not the height, I definitely want to modify the crossfall, hold the width of the road, and my new crossfall is going to be a positive 3%. Where's that going to take place? Well, I'm going to take it place from, not from the start of the reference, I'm actually going to get it from the start of the curve return. Actually, it'll be the end of the curve return in this case. So I just go and select that one, and I can pick the string anywhere. I can pick it here where it's a little bit easier to get access to it, because I'm just after the end point or that tangent point to be located there. So if I hit apply, you'll see at that stage, we've got 3% in one direction now. And at that same point here, we've got the V happening just before it, where we've got the negative 3%. And you can see how that's also because the road's been lifted, the footpath, the boundary string here, and then the interfacing has also been stepped out a little bit as well. It doesn't marry up very nicely because right at this very chainage here, we've basically just changed the crossfall. So that's working fine. We can then also put in a transition. So a bit like the height transition, sorry, the width transition we used before, it's the same string and I've just copied and pasted it down. I can change it so that I've got two crossfall answers. I could say I want to go from -3, which is what we have up the road here. And the new crossfall I'm going to produce it by the time it gets to the end here is going to be a full 3%. Now, where's this going to happen? Again, I've got all these different chainage options. So let's have a look at a different one here. I could actually say, I'm going to get the start chainage from the start of the previous one. So there's an option in here under the changes. I'm just trying to show you how this one will work. Relative to a previous start. And it'll want to know how many rows back in terms of modifying. So I'm actually, the start here is going to be the start 1 row back up. And I'm also going to do the same here. Start, previous start 1 row back up. And the start of the transition is going to be over 25 meters in the relative back along the reference string. So the end will be here. And the start is coming from the answer, which is the end of the curve return, but also -25 meters. And you can see how we can start to link these things together. So there's actually no changes involved. And we can get this transition all to work quite nicely now. And you can see that the pavement transitioning up from a -3, it's flat in the middle here, then it's transitioned across to the +3 over this side. So that's all working pretty nicely for me. Now I might just want to remove some links through the intersection itself. So I'm just going to come in here and go put in another comment, remove links or strings. And under the fixed part of the template here, which we actually have been utilizing a lot, this is probably again where probably 80–90% of the commands you'll want to be using are. We can definitely insert strings, come in and modify them as we need to. And you can see further down the list, we can also remove links. So I'm going to come in here and under fixed, remove, I'm going to remove them from a name. So the way, again, typical 12D, the panel's set up the same way. It will ask you, okay, what is the link that you want to use? And I'm going to keep that curb lip line, the yellow one there, running through the intersection itself, because that forms up the nice 3% crossfall that I was after. But outside of that, all the links that are reduced will be removed automatically for me. Again, I just needed to tell it where this is taking place. So I can say the end of the curve return on that side, and that'll go through to the start of the other string, which is my curve return on this side. So the curve returns will need to be named, which they typically are anyway in a design, but it will need to be looking for a model and then a string name. It has to be a unique string name within that model for this to work. So if I hit apply there, you can see it will simply just chop out those strings through those links through that position, and it sets it up for the intersection quite nicely. So we've done a couple of commands, just quickly having a look at it there. It's all set up and applying quite nicely. I'm just going to move in and show you quickly some of the boxing or creating some strings on other levels or layers also. But before we get there, we might just actually bring up a cross-section view, go on profile one of the cross-sections. I might come in here and just show you one of these ones. It's 10 times exaggerated, so I'll probably bring that down. Add on to the survey tin. And change some of the settings here to extend out the profile so I can see a little bit further, maybe another 5 meters to the left and right. And I'll also toggle on the grades, toggle on the grades here so we can see the cross-sectional shape of the road there and how it's working. Adding on the design strings. And you can see the links that are produced, like our template, down our alignment itself, the lip of the curbs, the top, the back, and so on. We're going to use those links in a minute to actually form up the pavement, but I just wanted you to understand what's happening there and how it all relates. These are all basically based off the MTF file, and it's all set up so that we can quickly adjust the road if we need to. So in 12D, if we needed to adjust the alignment, we'd be coming under strings and editor, and we could select our super alignment string, our center line. Once that's selected and accepted, you'll get the editor open for the super alignment, and you can see this row has actually just been set up in the IP fashion, sorry. So if I was to move the alignment, again, because there's no changes involved, as soon as I move it and I go back and recalculate the MTF file, then everything will get adjusted and moved in relation to that position. Now you'll see that moving it around has caused possibly some other issues with the parking bay and things like that, but that's where we would be developing some sort of a chain to process these in order. And the alignments could all be set into some sort of a chain. There'll be other talks on chains, so I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail on the chains, but we can set up the design process. So if the one center line was to update, other alignments, other center lines would also adjust, as well as curb returns and possibly even our little construction bay as well. So if we hit run now, you'll see all the other alignments would adjust to their new position and basically fix their positioning there. Coming back and recalculating it again would mean that all the alignments, all the strings and those links would also be modified to its new position. So again, we've moved away from so just wanted to quickly show you that, so that we've moved away from actually locking in chainages. This alignment can get longer and shorter. I can move sideways, and the alignments and the super alignments can all be linked together with a chain to update dynamically as the design might update. I wanted to finish off just by creating some subgrade layers or strings in there. Again, there's only a couple of modifiers that you need to know how to use this. And again, it's just an introduction to how this works. So if I come back across here and I open up the modifiers to the left, so we're talking about creating extra strings underneath the actual design surface. At the moment, so I'm just going to insert a couple of lines in here. At the moment, everything that we've done, you can see here has the word design, design, design. So everything is actually being done at the design surface itself. If we're wanting to insert other strings, I can come under fixed, insert, but I wanted to insert it absolutely, so it goes above or below, but it's still an absolute distance based off one of the previous other links. So inserting absolute, again, if you open up the tools, you can see it looks very similar to the other, just inserting a string, in terms of I need to give it some sort of a string name. So I'm going to call it subgrade, and I'll call it center line to start off with, because we'll start off with the center line one. And color, let's pick a color cyan. Now the width is going to be 0, and the height is going to be the height of 0.55 of a meter, or 550 mils depth of pavement. It's going to be based off the design surface, but the link I'm going to base it off is our center line link here. So I'm basing it off the designs link that is in the center line here, but my new link isn't actually going to be in the design surface. At the moment, because there are no other layers involved or produced at the moment, I simply just need to type a new one in. So I'm going to type in the word pavement. You can give it whatever name you like. And this is definitely going to run from the start to the end of the alignment string. So, or we might actually, so go apply there. I'm actually going to copy that because it actually doesn't run all the way. It actually stops at that curb return. So I'm going to copy that down to there. Like I said, it's a bit like Excel. We can copy and paste answers around the place, and I'll hit apply, and 12D will have generated the new string underneath the center line. So it's the insert absolute. I can again copy this command and paste it in again. Just need to change the name of it, because now we're talking about the subgrade under the curb lip line, or the KLL. Same depth, but this one will be based off the curb lip line, or the yellow dot that you can see here. So it's got being based off the curb lip line. And again, if I hit apply, 12D will have gone through and generated that new string. So both of these have been developed into a different layer altogether called pavement. And then to actually form up our shape, we'd be coming in and going create and creating up our shape. Now the shapes themselves can be given a name. So I'm just going to call this pavement. Given a color, I'll just give it a light gray color. And we need to nominate the models that these strings and the tri-meshes will get generated into. So I'll just call this design pave RSO1, and I'll also put it in, create the solid itself into a model called design mesh pave RSO1. Now the shape itself, I don't want it to be an open shape, I actually want it to be closed. And I need to essentially draw the direction, or sorry, draw the links in that I want to form this shape out of. Essentially, I'm putting together the 4 dots. So I've got across the top of the design surface, the design left-hand side on the center of the road. I'm coming across the road itself to the curved lip line, and just by clicking in the cell here, doing a right mouse button, it comes up and gives you all the links that are generated as part of your design surface. So for my case, it's definitely the curved lip line. I then need to continue in a anti-clockwise fashion if that's the way you're going to go. You can go either clockwise or anti-clockwise. You just have to continue the whole way around the same direction. But I'm now looking for strings in the pavement layer, not in the design layer anymore. And again, these are the 2 strings that I've generated. So I need to start at the curved lip line underneath here and coming around and closing back at the subgrade with the center line itself. Hit OK there. So it's just closed the panel down. And that was a subtle difference between the apply and OK. By hitting apply, definitely recalculates everything and gets everything to be regenerated. By hitting OK, it will save the command for you, but it doesn't actually recalculate it on the way through. So if you're doing a lot of commands, you might just want to hit OK until you're actually ready to apply it. And then in 12D, we'll go through and apply that command. But that's essentially those 2 commands there are the basis of creating all our solids. If I came back to the plus button here, I can then turn on the mesh, and you can see the mesh there. I do a quick string inquire on it, and you can see it's actually come up with a volume for that amount of pavement in there as well. So just those 2 commands actually can start to create some solids for you. Not everything has to be designed on the design surface. You're more than welcome to actually use other layers. You just have to nominate what those layers are going to be called, and then the solids can be created from any shape you wish, really. So that's just a quick introduction to some of the 12D tools. Again, not very many commands, getting you hopefully a little bit more familiar with how it works and how it all hangs together. If you do get a chance over the coming days, I do suggest you have a look at some of the other design talks that are on. There's quite a number on the super alignments, both the intersection point method and the element method. There's touching on the snippets and how the snippets that are developed and produced through 12D, but some users are actually writing some pretty cool snippets themselves. We just created one apply MTF. There is an apply MTF manager that will actually allow you to apply all the center lines in one go, or all the curve returns for you in one go. So rather than actually having to go there and actually set up all the functions, loading in the templates in the MTF file, which I've just shown you, which is the backbone, essentially, or an introduction to it all, the manager will actually allow you to do that all dynamically. It's a lot quicker than actually filling in all the panels. I touched briefly on the chains and how they can be utilized in the design if things were to shift or adjust. And the quick design tools that are in 12D now will also make the design process, especially for road design, intersections, cul-de-sac bulbs and the such, way quicker than it was in any of the past. But again, if you break it down, you're going to be stuck with the same 3 building blocks of the tin, either the snippet or a template, and also your geometry, the super alignment itself. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.